Hey there. I am going to introduce myself to you folks just in case you stumble upon this video, even though I'm just sending this to my friends. You never know, it's YouTube. My name's Tommy on MTG Arena. My username is Tommy_B. You can check me out usually on the leaderboard in 17 lands. My play group, we have a tournament that we play for every single format. It's a sealed tournament that my buddy Andrew runs, and we've got about 8 people or so in the league, and we all get a sealed on Arena, and then over the course of the format, we battle each other in round robin style, and then eventually in a playoff style, all the while adding packs to our format. Anyway, it's a great format. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, Andrew, for putting that together. But I was watching one of the playoff matches today, and there was a scenario where one of our friends, Rye, had a ballista out and ended up playing out his hand instead of using ballista's abilities, and it was a stalemate situation. And I realized that what I would have done was use ballista's abilities, and I realized that that's not an intuitive play. And so a while back over the summer, maybe but even before then, I created a video about a very similar situation. And I just never posted it because I was like, who the hell wants to listen to me talk about Magic? But I'm going to bring it back up. I'm going to post it. I'm going to send it to my friends as maybe the start of something, and maybe eventually I'll actually make this look good or whatever. But what I want to talk about today is resource management within a limited game, and specifically identifying the mini game. I'm going to say that again because I think I might be able to edit it in because I stumbled a bit. What I'm going to talk about now is resource management. And specifically, within a game of Limited, identifying mini games. These are so often, like, you see them with Planeswalkers because they're really obvious, where your opponent plays a Planeswalker or you play a Planeswalker, and you know now I either have to kill this Planeswalker or I'll do whatever I can to keep this Planeswalker alive, because it will accrue such an advantage over time that it will overwhelm your opponent. But I don't see it happen as often on abilities, on creatures. I don't think we look at them the same because it's not as obvious. So I break down one of my favorite games I've ever watched of Magic between arguably one of the best players in the world and Seth Manfield. He was playing a game of Limited, and he made there was a 2-turn sequence that he identified a mini game and managed his resources really well. And it was a huge level up for me. And it articulated something I started to do intuitively but didn't have language for. So I'm going to break down those 2 turns and send them to my friends, and hopefully they find it valuable or not. I don't know. But either way, here goes, yeah? All right. I want to point out 2 creatures. The first creature is the Skullport Merchant. Skullport Merchant is a 1/4 that if you pay 2, can sack either a creature or a treasure and draw a card. Very powerful ability. There's also this Paladin all the way to the left, which is a 1/1 that has really 2 abilities. The first is you can pay 2 mana and you can create a treasure, also losing a life. And remember that a treasure token can be used for mana. It can also be used in this sequence with the Skullport Merchant to draw a card. So, knowing that those 2 creatures and their abilities, Seth has a decision here. And I think the intuitive play, the play that I would have made, the play that many people would make, is to play the Spawn for 3 mana, because the Spawn has a nice little enter the battlefield effect, which is gain a life, lose a life. But that's not nearly as important, as it's a 2/3 that blocks well against this 4/1 Ranger, but also attacks well into this 4/1 Ranger. You would trade your Spawn for the Ranger. And you have more creatures, and your opponent has more resources. So you kind of, I think my intuition says you kind of want to end this game quickly. because your opponent has way more resources than you do. But Seth makes the correct decision, which is to not play the vampire spawn. And this was the first level up moment for me, because Seth makes the decision right here while we're at 19 and 20 that, I'll pause here, that he's not the beatdown. Even though he has the most creatures on the battlefield, even though he doesn't have the most resources available, our opponent has 6. He knows that with the merchant and the paladin, there becomes a little mini game, which is about resources. And Seth decides, I'm not the beatdown, and instead, I'm going to use this 2-card combo until my opponent just gets buried with my cards. So you're going to see here, it's a really important moment. You're going to see here, Seth, at the end of our opponent's turn, they just play these 2 creatures, expanding their board. Seth is going to sack this treasure, and then he's going to make a treasure, fully utilizing his 2 resources that are currently on the board. Essentially saying, unless you can beat this, he believes, Seth does, that he's going to win the game in the long run. Our opponent wisely decides to take our attack, to not make any blocks. And what we decide is to play a spawn. We drew another spawn. So now we play the spawn, and we arrived at the same decision point. Should we play our vampire spawn? And Seth arrives at the same answer. No, we should not, because I'm going to continue to get up resources with this 2-card combo. And the spawn just isn't going to do too much on this battlefield. So decides to pass turn with this 2-card combo up. And again, basically is saying to our opponent, I will beat you eventually with these 2 cards with resources. So he passes turn, and our opponent now, they hit their 6 land drop, they play a bard, they play a pack leader, they grow their 2/2 into a 3/3, and they have a commanding board over us. And the important thing to know is that that's intentional. Seth decided not to play out our board and knows that over time we're going to lose to those 6 cards, so we need to get up on resources. And now look, here we are. We've arrived at 2 turns later, and now we have more cards than our opponent. We have 4, they have 3, and the board really hasn't changed much. Our opponent has played more creatures, but their attacks aren't great. If they attack with their pack leader, we block it with a spawn and a merchant. If they, or a spawn and a paladin. If they attack with this 3/3, again, we block it with a spawn or a paladin. If they attack with the 4/1 ranger, we block it with a hawk. There's really no good attacks that our opponent has. And so we have decided, once again, we are not the beatdown. We are the control player. We will win in resources. And we are now up a card on resources. And so Seth goes on to play this game really for the rest of the games in a similar fashion. Instead of attacking, instead of playing out all of our cards, he's keeping the cards in his hands, playing out what must be played out in order to ensure that our opponent doesn't have good attacks, but leaving enough mana to make a mana or to make a treasure and to sack a treasure with our Skullport Merchant. So over time, this continues to happen, and Seth ends up winning this match. It actually becomes a really epic game, which you can check out on his stream. One that I really enjoyed watching. But he won it here.
Okay, so not super complicated, and I think probably just even looking back at this video now, there are many reasons why I didn't put this up on YouTube. 1, I think the quality is really bad. 2, I don't know why anyone would listen to me. But the other is that it feels really obvious when I talk it through, and I'm like, is this special? Is this something that people either are paying attention to, or should they, or whatever? I don't know. But I know that this kind of approach to playing Magic demonstrated to me a lot of nuance in the game, and it demonstrates an opportunity to become a better Magic player. Because if you're able to do what Seth has done in these 2 turns, what did he do? Well, the first is he identified and initiated a mini game. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know what you would call it, what the official term is, but he essentially saw that on board he was winning and could get up on resources. So there's no sense in playing out all his spells. Instead, he's going to get up on more resources, and his opponent will have to answer this problem. So he identified a minigame. And within that minigame, the proposal is, if you cannot disrupt my two creature combo, I will eventually win the game. As you saw, that's what happened. Eventually, he just drew too many cards for our opponent. Even when our opponent's creatures were a little better than ours, they still couldn't quite attack. And because of that, he was able to get up an advantage. The heuristic to this is like, only do this in a stalemate or when you're winning. There are many reasons why you would do this if you're behind, and there are many reasons why you wouldn't do it if you're in a stalemate or you're winning. It's a heuristic. I'm just saying, when one of these, I guess what I'm saying is like, keep an eye out for stalemate situations and situations where you're ahead, where you can apply even more pressure, not by creatures, but by resources. So imagine your resources as a weapon. And the more cards you see, the more you're going to find your better cards, and the more answers you're going to have to any problems they have. So identify and initiate the mini game when you're in a stable board. And then finally, just manage your resources appropriately. You know, he was able to identify that if he plays in that second turn, if he plays one vampire spawn but not the other, he can not only still do his card combo, but he'll have pretty good blocks across the board. So even though he's a little behind on creature power and just number of creatures, you know, it's actually not that big of a deal, because he's just going to be able to make good blocks anyway, and he can continue to get up on resources in his hand. Okay, so one of the things I do to identify these situations when you see a minigame, essentially you look at creature. I've already mentioned that it happens in Planeswalkers a lot, and that's obvious, so I won't even mention them. But look at your creatures and see if they have any really powerful abilities. So I guess first step is to identify powerful abilities. These abilities that you saw on the battlefield were incredibly powerful. They're not like draw a card, discard a card, right? Like, these are incredibly powerful abilities that left unchecked will run away with the game. So first, identify powerful abilities on your creatures that, if unchecked, will win you the game. Then you need to ask yourself, am I winning on the board? Am I winning with resources in my hand? And am I winning with my life total? And the game of Magic is kind of like pushing those three questions forward at the same time and determining, okay, I can actually lose a little bit on life because I need to get up on resources, or my life is fine, so I don't mind if there are one creature ahead of me on the board, but they are 6 cards versus my 2 or 3, so I really need to catch up on resources. So you're just kind of like pushing these 3 levers forward at all times and trying to have a conversation with, am I winning on the board, am I winning in my hand, and am I winning with my life total, and navigate those resources. So those are the 2 like big takeaways for me from this game: is identify and initiate a mini game that has to do with resources, and then to manage those resources appropriately and try and determine and play a kind of play the game of Magic, which is figuring out at all times if you are ahead on board, if you're ahead on resources, and if you're ahead on life, how should you be playing differently as it relates to those 3 questions. I don't know if that makes sense at all. I'm going to just stop this recording and upload it and never look at it again, and imagine that maybe 1 or 2 of my friends will watch it and maybe it'll be valuable. Maybe not. I don't know. But hopefully this is helpful for you guys that did watch it, and hopefully the next time we see each other and there's a mini game on the board on your side, I get to watch you initiate that game and try and work around it and see if I can find a way to disrupt it. Cool. That's it for me. Have a good night. Have a good day. Whatever the color of the sky is when you're watching this. Bye, y'all.